Well, this is also Gardner back with you on our podcast, Followed by Mercy. And I am so excited that you would take the time every day to listen just for a moment. As God is growing me and my knowledge of Him, I'm learning more about Him every day. Fact is, I would say that I see God teaching me more today than I ever have in my life. And we're going through the book of Galatians, just a scan over, just a look over. And we've seen Abraham and we've learned a little bit about his faith. And we're going to go just a little bit more because Paul tells us another story. He says, "Tell me, ye that desire to be under the law, do you hear the law? Do you not hear the law?" Abraham had two sons, the one by a bondwoman, the other by a free woman. That's the story of Hagar and Sarah. It's an allegory, a living illustration of the difference between bondage and freedom. You see, there were two women and two covenants. If you can see the contrast between Hagar and Sarah, you'll understand the whole message of Galatians. Hagar represents Mount Sinai, the covenant of law, of effort, of slavery. Sarah represents grace, the covenant of promise, of faith, of freedom. Hagar's son was born after the flesh. Sarah's son was born by promise. Two women, two sons, two ways of living. See, God promised Abraham and Sarah a child that would be the start of a great nation. But years passed, nothing happened. Sarah got really tired of waiting. She told Abraham to have a child through her servant Hagar. Seemed logical, made sense humanly, but it wasn't faith, it was flesh. It was you doing and trying to accomplish God's promises. Hagar gave birth to Ishmael, but he wasn't the son of promise. Years later, there's a miracle and Sarah conceives Isaac. This child is born through faith and not their effort. Ishmael is what happens when you try to help God out. Isaac's what happens when you trust God. That hits home, doesn't it? How many times have we tried to speed up God's plan, to make things happen on our own timetable? When we do, we always end up with Ishmael, something born of effort instead of grace. There were two sons representing two covenants. Hagar's covenant is the law, Mount Sinai, the old system of rules and rituals that can't give life. Sarah's covenant is grace, Mount Zion, the heavenly Jerusalem, the promise that God himself would do what we could never do, what Abraham could never do. You see, the law produces slaves, but grace produces sons. That's the dividing line of Galatians. You can live like Hagar's child, always striving, always afraid, always trying to earn love, and never feeling secure. Or you can learn to live like Isaac, laughing, resting, rejoicing in the promise that your Father's love is already yours. So he is told to throw out the bondwoman. Paul says something strong here, something that sounds very harsh. Cast out the bondwoman and her son, for the son of the bondwoman shall not be heir with the son of the free woman. That's not cruelty, it's clarity. You can't live in both houses at once. You can't live half under grace and half under law. Though I will admit that most of us have tried to do that quite a bit. You can't trust Christ for salvation and trust yourself for sanctification. You can't mix Ishmael and Isaac in the same tent. They will always fight. And that's what happens in our hearts when we try to live by both law and grace. We end up in conflict with ourselves, with others, with God. The old nature and the new nature cannot share control. One has to go. Let the old system go. Let go of the self-effort, the performance-driven faith. Stand in grace. Live in freedom. Don't go back to slavery. But now, after you have known God, or rather are known of God, how turn you again to the weak and beggarly elements whereunto you desire again to be in bondage? Why would you want to go back? You've been adopted, embraced, set free, and now you want to crawl back into the cell? It sounds foolish, but we do it all the time. We say, I'm forgiven, but we still punish ourselves. We say, I'm loved, but we still live in fear. We say, I'm accepted, but we still wear a mask. That's going back to Hagar's tent. Legalism is the religion of the flesh dressed in Sunday clothes. It looks holy, but it leads to bondage. Grace may look risky, but it's the only way to truly live. Then comes one of the most beautiful verses in the New Testament. Stand fast, therefore, in the liberty wherewith Christ hath made us free, and be not entangled again with the yoke of bondage. Stand fast. Hold your ground, because freedom isn't something you earn, it's something you guard. Grace doesn't mean life will be easy, but it means we're not fighting to be accepted. We're living from it. If the devil can't make you bad, he'll make you busy. He'll fill your life with religious activity that feels spiritual, but keeps you from resting in grace. You don't have to prove your worth to God anymore. You don't have to fix what Christ has already finished. We are free, free from guilt, free from striving, free from the tyranny of enough. Some people hear that and they get nervous. Well, if you tell people they're free, they'll go wild. But the truth is the opposite. When you know how deeply you're loved, you don't want to sin. You want to walk in that love. Fear can restrain behavior, but only love can change hearts. The law says you better behave. Grace says you already belong. Belonging changes everything. The freest man is the one who does what he wants, but the one who is the freest man, not the guy who does what he wants, but is the one who wants what he ought to want. In other words, we are new. We have a new want to. That's what grace does. It reshapes your desires. It gives you a new appetite, new strength, new joy. Freedom isn't cheap. Christ made us free. That freedom cost him everything. He took our stripes, the thorns, the cross, so we could live without the chains. Don't treat that freedom lightly. Don't hand it back to a jailer of fear and guilt. Live like it matters. Live like someone who has been redeemed. Sometimes that means saying no to voices that try to drag you back under the law. Voices that say you have to earn God's approval. They whisper you never measure up. They say you need to hear the voice of grace when it says finished. You see, Isaac's name means laughter. And when you finally live in grace, joy comes back. That's what this story is really about. Grace doesn't just set you free, it gives you your laughter back. The laughter of someone who knows the burden is gone. The laughter of someone who can finally rest. Paul ends this by saying, so then, brethren, we are not children of the bondwoman, but of the free. That's us, not bound, not striving, not afraid, free. Stop living like Hagar's child, tired, fearful, burdened by the weight of trying to make God proud. Grace isn't calling you home to Sarah's tent. Grace is calling you home to Sarah's tent, where promise lives and laughter waits. Don't go back to the law. Don't go back to guilt. Stay where the promise is. You've been born free, so live like it. So we are so blessed. We've walked with Paul through a battle between law and grace. We've been to Abraham's tents. We've been to the tent of bondage and the tent of promise. And that brings us to the big question. Are we going to still live free? Why do I keep letting things abuse my freedom? For brethren, you have been called unto liberty. Only use not liberty for an occasion of the flesh, but by love serve one another. That one verse holds the balance between license and legalism. You're free, but freedom has a purpose. You're free to love. Grace doesn't make a man lawless. It makes him loving. That's the difference. The law demands love. Grace delivers it. When Christ lives in you, obedience stops being something you have to do. It becomes something you want to do. Grace puts the road in your heart. You don't need constant signs and warnings when love becomes your direction. Stand fast, therefore, in the liberty wherewith Christ hath made us free. And let's not be entangled again with the yoke of bondage. The yoke was a heavy harness that tied the oxen together. It's slavery rules, and rituals. It's heavy, creaking, and impossible to bear. But we slip back into it all the time, don't we? Freedom in Christ doesn't mean you have no master. It means your master loves you perfectly. It means you're not working for his approval anymore. You're walking in it. If you be circumcised, Christ shall profit you nothing. He wasn't attacking the ritual. He was attacking the mindset. Circumcision had become a badge of pride. Look how devoted I am. If you can depend on that, you cannot add one law to grace. The second you add something to grace, it's no longer grace. It's not that God stops loving you. It's that you stop living in freedom. Grace and law cannot be mixed without canceling each other out. It's not Christ plus anything. It's Christ alone. The moment you try to earn what he freely gives, you step back into slavery. And none of us want to live in slavery. We want the freedom that we find in Jesus. Isn't it exciting just to hear and see how the Apostle Paul, go read the book of Galatians again. Maybe you ought to read it every day while we're just talking about it, and let the Lord continue to teach your heart. You are loved. You're accepted. We are in good shape before the Lord. Go enjoy what God is doing.